The grand ballroom of the Royal Crest Hotel was bathed in golden light, filled with the most influential people in the city: CEOs, politicians, heirs to fortunes. Laughter mingled with the clink of champagne glasses, conversations carefully curated to maintain power and prestige. Then the doors opened. Ethan Lancaster, a billionaire known for his cold, calculated nature, walked in. But tonight, no one was looking at him. They were looking at her, a woman who did not belong in this world. She wasn't wearing diamonds or designer silk. Her dress, though elegant, lacked the extravagance expected in this room. But it wasn't just her appearance that turned heads, it was her confidence. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't overwhelmed. She moved like she had a purpose. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who was she? Why was she here? Then, she did something that sent a cold chill through the room. She smiled, not with hesitation but with certainty. And before the night was over, she would do something that would shake the entire elite circle to its core. What was she about to reveal? And why did Ethan bring her here? The answer would change everything. Welcome to a world of untold stories and shocking truths. Some secrets change lives forever, and this one just might. Let's begin. The moment Ethan Lancaster stepped into the ballroom, everything changed. Normally, his presence commanded attention. Whispers of admiration, fear, and speculation always followed in his wake. But tonight, it wasn't him they were looking at. It was her, a woman no one recognized. She stood beside him, poised yet out of place. Her dress, though well-fitted, lacked the excess the elite draped themselves in. No diamonds glittered on her neck. No designer label marked her as one of them. Yet, despite all this, she did not shrink. In a room full of billionaires, socialites, and power players, she looked completely unbothered. That unsettled them. Victoria Sinclair, the evening's host, forced a polished smile as Ethan approached the VIP table with the woman at his side. "Ethan," she greeted smoothly, though her eyes flickered with curiosity. "I wasn't expecting to see you tonight." Ethan gave a slight nod, slipping into his usual, unreadable demeanor. Victoria's gaze shifted to the woman. "And your guest is?" Before Ethan could answer, the woman extended her hand. Her grip was firm, her voice steady. "Isla Monroe." A beat of silence. The name meant nothing to Victoria, and that fact alone made her uneasy. The city's elite thrived on recognition. Power wasn't just about wealth, it was about knowing who mattered. But no one knew Isla Monroe, and that made her dangerous. Across the table, whispers started. "Who is she? Did Ethan lose a bet? This must be some kind of joke." But Ethan wasn't laughing, and neither was Isla. She sat with effortless grace, crossing one leg over the other. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't playing the role of an outsider who got lucky. She was watching them. And for the first time that evening, the power dynamics in the room had shifted. Then Isla did something that made the entire table freeze. She smiled. Not a forced, awkward smile. Not the uncertain expression of someone struggling to fit in. A smile that said, "I know something you don't." And in that moment, a silent war had begun. The weight of silence pressed against the VIP table. The other guests continued their conversations, but here, tension curled like smoke. Victoria Sinclair leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine, measuring, calculating. "Ethan, darling," she said with a light laugh, "you've always had an eye for interesting company." Ethan smirked. "I do." Victoria's gaze settled on Isla. A test. A challenge. "And what do you do, Miss Monroe?" A question designed to expose her, to remind her where she didn't belong. Isla didn't hesitate. She met Victoria's gaze head-on. "I research people." A flicker of something passed through Victoria's expression. Surprise? Amusement? Irritation? How fascinating. "And what have you researched?" Isla set down her glass, her voice as smooth as the wine in Victoria's hand. "You." A pause. Sharp. Uncomfortable. Victoria's knuckles whitened around her glass. "Oh?" she said lightly, masking the stiffness in her tone. "I do hope you found something interesting." Isla smiled. "Oh, I did." And just like that, the night shifted. Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her fingers gripped the stem of her glass just a little too tightly. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching the exchange with mild amusement. He wasn't interfering. This was exactly what he had brought Isla here for. Victoria's voice remained smooth, but there was a sharpness beneath it. "And what exactly have you discovered about me, Isla?" The table stilled. Even those who had been pretending not to listen were now paying full attention. Isla took her time, lifting her drink but not sipping, just letting the moment hang. "For starters, the Sinclair Foundation is quite an impressive operation. $1 million initiative helping the homeless, funding shelters." She paused, tilting her head. "Or at least, that's what the press releases say." Victoria's fingers twitched, but her expression remained poised. "And what do you think they should say?" Isla finally took a sip before answering. "That only 12% of those funds ever make it to the people you claim to help." A sharp inhale from one of the guests. Victoria's smile froze. "I don't know where you're getting your information," she said, her voice tight. Isla set down her glass, her gaze steady. "Oh, I do." And for the first time, Victoria looked afraid. The tension at the VIP table was thick enough to choke on. The hum of conversation in the ballroom continued, but around Victoria and Isla, a silent battle was unfolding. Victoria's fingers smoothed over her napkin, her practiced composure slipping just slightly. "That's quite an accusation," she said, her voice lighter than before, but now it was forced. Isla tilted her head, her gaze sharp. "Is it? Or is it just inconvenient?" A few seats away, Robert Hawthorne, the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company, cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. He had seen power plays before, but never one quite like this. Victoria let out a soft laugh, but it lacked its usual warmth. "Ethan," she turned to him now, reaching for control. "You do keep interesting company." Ethan finally spoke, his voice smooth. "I do." He set down his glass, looking at Isla. "But the best part is she came here on her own." A flicker of something passed through Victoria's expression, uncertainty. For the first time, she realized Isla wasn't just Ethan's guest. She was here with a purpose. Isla leaned forward just slightly. "Would you like me to tell you where the rest of that money went, Victoria?" The color drained from Victoria's face. And suddenly, the night wasn't just an elegant gathering anymore. It was a reckoning. For the first time that evening, Victoria Sinclair had no words. The carefully curated poise, the effortless charm cracks were starting to show. The guests at the table sensed it too. Some shifted uncomfortably, others leaned in just a little, eyes darting between Isla and Victoria. Ethan took a slow sip of his drink, watching the unraveling with quiet amusement. "Where did the money go, Victoria?" Isla's voice was calm, controlled, but ruthless. Victoria let out a breathy laugh, a last-ditch effort to regain ground. "This is absurd. I don't know what you think you—" Isla cut her off. "The shell company in the Caymans. The one under your assistant's name." The blood drained from Victoria's face. Across the table, Robert Hawthorne set down his fork. Now he was paying attention. "I've seen the transfers," Isla continued, her voice like silk. "Donations rerouted, accounts scrubbed. It's all very deliberate." She tilted her head, almost like someone thought no one would ever find out. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it, because there was nothing to say. The walls were closing in, and Isla wasn't done yet. The room felt smaller, tighter. The once elegant gala, filled with laughter and polite conversation, now felt suffocating, at least for Victoria Sinclair. Isla had given her every chance to deny it, to push back, but there was nothing left to say. Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wineglass, but she didn't drink. She was stalling. The other guests exchanged glances. The shift was undeniable. Ethan finally spoke, his voice casual, too casual. "Well, Victoria, anything you'd like to add?" For a second, she almost answered. But what could she say? The evidence was undeniable. Then Isla leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "You know what the real problem is, Victoria?" Isla's tone was velvet, smooth but laced with something sharp. Victoria swallowed hard. "And what's that?" Isla smiled, slow and knowing. "I'm not the only one who knows." Victoria's breath hitched. Panic flickered behind her eyes. And just like that, the game was over. For the first time in her carefully curated life, Victoria Sinclair was no longer in control. The weight of too many eyes was on her now. The same people who had once showered her with praise, who had admired her poise and influence, were now watching her unravel. She could feel it. The shift. Someone at the table cleared their throat, breaking the silence. Robert Hawthorne, always the businessman, adjusted his cufflinks before speaking. "Victoria, is there something you'd like to clarify?" His tone was polite, too polite, the kind of tone one used before distancing themselves from a sinking ship. Victoria straightened her shoulders, a desperate attempt to reclaim control. "This is ridiculous. I don't know where she's getting this from, but—" Isla cut her off. "I have the documents." The table froze. A cold realization settled over Victoria's face. This wasn't just talk. Isla let the words hang in the air, her gaze steady, unshaken. The other guests exchanged glances. They weren't fools. They knew what this meant. This wasn't just a rumor. This wasn't just an accusation. This was a death sentence. Victoria Sinclair, the queen of deception, was finally exposed. And Ethan Lancaster? He was enjoying every second of it. Victoria Sinclair had spent years perfecting her imagined untouchable philanthropist, a queen of high society. But tonight, in the span of a few minutes, it had all crumbled. The silence at the VIP table was deafening. Isla Munro had done what no one else dared. She had pulled back the curtain. And now, the room wasn't just watching Victoria. They were judging her. Victoria's breath was uneven, her fingers trembling against the tablecloth. This is a mistake," she whispered. But the words held no weight. No one rushed to her defense, because in their world, loyalty was conditional. And when someone fell, the rest stepped back. Ethan Lancaster leaned forward, finally breaking his silence. His voice was smooth, almost amused. "Well, Victoria," he said, tilting his glass slightly, "it seems you've run out of moves." A strangled noise left Victoria's throat, but she couldn't argue. There was nothing left to say. Isla stood up, calm, unshaken. She gave Victoria one last look, not of pity but of certainty. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. The night wasn't over, but for Victoria Sinclair, it was. Some truths change everything, and some mysteries are never meant to be solved. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next one might be even more shocking. Until then, stay curious and stay prepared for the unexpected.